Do you ever want to dive deeper into the Bible, but you just don't know where to begin, or struggle to feel like you even have the time? When you read the Bible, do you get frustrated because you know there's so much more in there? You just have no clue how to get it out? Or maybe you want to know the Bible better, and you're looking for any resource to help. Then this is the podcast for you. Welcome to the Context and Color of the Bible. We're sisters. I'm Veronica.
I'm Erica.
And we love to study the Bible, and we love to help others understand it better. When it comes to our own study of Scripture, we have found that in bringing back the context of Scripture, it adds so much to our understanding. It actually adds color to the black and white pages of the text. So we were trying to figure out if there's a VeggieTales that goes with this next part of the story, Daniel 1 verses 3 through 10. And then Brian's like, what are you going to do? Have the vegetables eat vegetables? Yeah. There's probably not a VeggieTales to go with this Bible story.
Yeah.
It might feel a little wrong.
The cannibalistic VeggieTale episode.
I wonder if they ever considered that.
Yeah. Didn't pass the test screening.
Yeah. Yes. But with that, hopefully it sets you up for, we are going to talk about Daniel and his friends and eating healthy.
Yeah.
Daniel diet.
The Daniel diet.
Remember, that was popular for a while.
I might undermine the Daniel diet.
Okay. You can always email us, jump on our website, and tell Brian why you think the Daniel diet is healthy.
Yeah. Yep.
So
Take it to Facebook.
Yes. Let's get Ezekiel bread out there while we're at it.
Oh man, you don't want to know what
what Eric and Brian think about Ezekiel bread.
That's a bonus episode.
Read context, people. Read the bigger context and go, it was not a bread recipe God was handing out. So with that, this is not a diet plan.
Yeah.
So tell us then, Brian, what it is.
All right. So Daniel chapter 1. So last episode, we talked about how the Nebuchadnezzar came in and took a variety of articles from the temple of the Lord and carried those off into Babylon. Then verse 3, he orders his chief court official to bring Israelites from the royal family line, to bring them into this program. And it's funny because like all of a sudden even as readers, we're like, whoa, wait, they didn't just take monetary goods or gold or silver. Like they took people too. And we find out like a whole group of people was also taken captive. So we have both these holy implements taken captive, and now like people from the royal line are taken captive, which, side note, I always kind of forget. Like, I think Daniel was probably of the Davidic family, at least at some level.
We don't have a tribe associated with Daniel?
I mean, he was from Judah, but we know he was from a royal lineage, or at least within the greater royal family, a nobility, I'd say. So who knows, maybe a distant cousin. But so, yeah, Daniel and friends, they're taken captive. And again, a bit of historical context that builds on last week. Everyone's familiar with the exile, the Babylonian exile, and people being brought in. Well, there's several exiles. It didn't all happen in one giant maneuver. The main one, the most horrific and memorable one, is 587 BC. That's when Nebuchadnezzar destroyed Jerusalem. It was like the last time, because they revolted and caused him headache after headache. That was the final one where most of the people were brought off into exile. There was a previous one a decade earlier in 597. That's when Ezekiel and several of the upper priests. So you imagine 587 was the biggest. The previous one, number 2, we'll call number 3, number 2, number 1, making our way backwards. Number 3 was the biggest amount of people. Number 2 was the second biggest, and that's when Ezekiel is brought into exile. And then prior to that was 605, and that's when Daniel and his friends were taken. A smaller group, a more targeted group, but these different groups were brought into exile. So I know I was confused before studying Daniel, going like, wait, like this guy went into exile and this guy went into exile, and those two dates don't always line up. It's because there's multiple exiles happening.
Okay, that makes sense.
And multiple incursions taking place. So Daniel and friends are taken off, and they're young men. What does it say? Handsome, without physical defects, showing aptitude for all kinds of learning, quick to understand, qualified to serve in the king's palace. So we're getting the A students, like the best, the cream of the crop, but they're also nobility. So kind of put your hat on. Why are they, your thinking cap? What's the purpose of this, do you think?
What? Hostages? Erica said hostages. But I'm also thinking, you take the lead. I mean, again, it goes back. Are we that powerful? We're so powerful. We took your nobility. We took your best. And now you're left with like the rejects.
Yep. Yep. You got the flunkies are back home trying to keep things together.
Yeah.
I think, just like I said last time, I think you're both right. I think there is a hostage factor, which gives a bit of leverage on the group back home. The king, like, hey, you guys need to stay in line, or we've got these guys here, and we might just kill them. I think there's also an intimidation kind of power play in that, this shows off we've got the best of the best. We've just taken your best people and we're going to incorporate them, infuse them into our society and into our governmental structure. And they're going to serve us and not your structures, which does it knocks down the potential of if you're taking the best and kind of forcing them off into your system. And I think too, from the Babylonian perspective, it wasn't just that, but also like they could be a potential help in you're bringing in these kids, and they were probably teenagers. So I'm thinking, from what I read, most estimates were probably 12 to 18-year-old boys were being taken off. And it's a good age. You don't take the 30-year-olds because they're already pretty set in their ways. Right. Let's take these young ones.
Indoctrination starts in schools.
Yeah, that's where we're going to do the indoctrination. And pretty much they went into, maybe you'd say it as strong as a brainwashing camp. I don't know if it was that. It was definitely a programming educational system. I don't know. Brainwashing might be too strong, but it might be fair in some aspects. But Babylon wants to leverage their culture and their knowledge potentially in ruling over these nations. Now I can pull Daniel in and say, hey, Daniel, your country's doing this. What does that mean? Like culturally, how can I, and they want to be able to use some of that knowledge back in ruling as well. So they're a bit of a tool and a asset to the ruling Babylonian empire as much as they're hostages and trophies. So Daniel and his friends are thrust into this indoctrination program. What does it say? The king. So he was the royal official was to teach them language and literature of the Babylonians. And so this is going through and teaching Daniel and his friends all about the cultural myths. And we know from just historical understanding of the Babylonians, they were big on astronomy, on like stars and signs in the heavens, mathematics and medicine. They were well advanced for the nations of that day. They were heavily into omen texts from archaeology. We know that they were, searching for not only omens in the sky, but like natural phenomenon and weather and other things. If omens were happening, observing the moon, another dream interpretation, all of these things were huge to them. And this is very likely what Daniel and his friends, the kind of learning and educational program he was in. And probably he was forced to study their religious practices, which would include occult religious things, discerning signs from entrails of animals and, those kinds of things that you would, we would consider demonology and that kinds of stuff. And all of this, the end goal was such so that they could stand in the presence of the king. Like, we want the smartest people, and they're going to go through our education program, and the ones that succeed are going to be his advisors. And they're going to be benefit to the king and benefit to the state, and they're going to serve at his whim. Let me go back here. So, yeah, and they're assigned a daily amount of food from the king's table. They were to be trained for 3 years, and after that time, enter into the king's service. Among those chosen were from Judah, Daniel, Hananiah, Mishael, Azariah. And the chief official gives them new names: Belteshazzar, Shadrach, Meshach, and Abednego. So not only are they're still kids. I mean,
your identity changes.
They've been stripped of their identity. Their name isn't even the same. They're taken hundreds of miles away. Like, it would have been a month-long journey by foot. So imagine a 30-day journey away from home. New language, new cultural values, no family. You're thrown into it's like a boot camp where everyone's probably the same age. And imagine yourself in that situation, because it's not just you and your 3 friends. It's people from all the nations that Babylon's been beating up on, putting their thumb on. They're extracting the cream of the crop from all these other nations and throwing them in together. I got to imagine there was a lot of competition.
Right.
A lot of dirty business going on, people trying to get top dog, jockeying for position. Because I get the sense, Daniel and his friends were probably, they as we're going to read, they were still wanting to honor God, but these other nations, those boys probably, they're going to go for whatever can get them the best. And some of this, you get ahead of yourself a little bit in thinking, but think about how this leads into the competitions between the enchanters and Daniel and his friends in these coming chapters. I'm sure there was animosity happening already at this point that would play out in the days to come, all the way through to Daniel's old age in the lion's den. So
we still remember back when we were in camp together.
Yeah, I remember you, and you keep one-upping me. And so, yeah, completely dehumanized in this. And I can't imagine, and I don't know how deep you want to go down that rabbit hole, but Daniel's never talked about his having family, and it's very likely he was also castrated. And he and his friends and all of the people in this program, because that was the typical.
It's a power move.
Yeah. And it makes it's just awful on top of awful on top of awful. But you guys listening, keep all of this in mind with how Daniel chooses to react to his God and how he chooses a life of faithfulness. And keeping in mind, he's 15 now, and in Daniel 6 at the lion's den, he's potentially in his 80s. Like, what a life, what a legacy.
70 years
of this. So, so they've lost their homes, their livelihoods, their names, their identity. And you go, this isn't fair. Like, and they must have been grasping for some sense of identity. And potentially it started here with food. Because I zipped past it, but verse 5, the king assigned them a daily amount of food and wine from the king's table. So that doesn't mean Nebuchadnezzar had this ginormous table that all the kids came and ate. It means that of the royal foodstuffs, they were allotted food. So not only are these boys the cream of the crop, they're the best, but they also get the best of the food because you're not going to have some haggard-looking kid. Like if it's if they're not getting enough nutrition to study and to learn, they're going to be of no use to the king. So we got to make sure they're being, in some senses, well-fed, well cared for. But what's Daniel concerned about? In verse 8, but Daniel resolved not to defile himself with the royal food and the wine. Defile is a strong word. And, well, you've talked about Leviticus, so where does defiling...
anything that becomes contaminated, that's been set apart as holy, if it becomes contaminated, it's defiled.
Exactly.
And it needs to be, if it can't be made holy, like pottery, it gets destroyed. But the rest of it can be washed. I mean, there's different rituals, and this is not a one-time, quick, one and done. There's a process you go through with the priest and with the blood and days and...
Is it easy to maintain holiness and avoid defiling?
No.
Exactly.
No.
Exactly. And
you walk outside and you're defiled.
And Daniel, he wasn't a priest, so I'm not trying to make that kind of point, but Daniel and his friends are thrust into an environment that was defiling at every level. And we talked about the implements last week. Here we have a godly young man and his friends, and they've made the decision, I don't want to be defiled. Like, I can't control this and this and this and this and this and this, but what's going into my body, I can control that. And so he makes up in his mind, I don't want to be defiled, because so you go wait a minute, what's the big deal? It's food, right? And certainly the food that the Babylonians were serving was non-kosher. So that's one problem. I'm sure it wasn't slaughtered properly. Perhaps there was blood in the meat. That's one level of problem. The just Jewish distinction of wanting to eat kosher food. But that doesn't explain what he's rejecting the wine too. Well, what's more likely the case is the context of what's going on behind the scenes in 1 Corinthians 10, where they're concerned about defiling food and eating food that's been dedicated to idols. That wasn't just a problem for the Corinthians and what Paul was trying to deal with. That was a problem in all the nations outside of Israel, because they'd take the animals to the temple, take the wine harvest to the temple, and they would pour out a little bit of wine, or they would kill one of the flock as a sacrifice to a god, basically a demon, and then parse out the rest of the food to the society as a way of giving our allegiance, and our local deity gets their cut, and then the rest of us eat as a representation of we're eating from the
but it
benefits.
Unifies everybody.
Yeah.
Look, don't forget, our God did this for you.
Yeah.
You're eating because our God blessed you, so
Yes.
make sure you return the favor.
Yeah, and it makes you, whether you want to or not, you kind of are acknowledging this allegiance to this God, and this God is caring for you, and not only that direction, but also across. Like, you're looking at my neighbor, and they're doing it too, and they're doing it too, and we're all kind of in this together. And Daniel's like, I don't want to eat food that has been dedicated to demons. As tempting as it would, because this was the rich food. This was the food that was going to make them the strongest, really.
And probably just fulfill it, like satisfying. Like, I'm thinking of Chase and Micah right now, who are 15.
Yeah.
I know when Micah comes to my house, he eats.
Yeah.
I would think you two never feed the child. But I also look at my own son and go, he never stops eating.
Right.
I mean, it's like, Chase, we're eating dinner in 30 minutes, but I'm starving now. Chase, you ate dinner 30 minutes ago, but I'm starving now. And it's like, Caden will sit down at 10 o'clock at night and have a whole second dinner. I can't keep two teenage boys fed because they're always hungry.
This is another remarkable statement about Daniel and his character, because he's that age at this time, and he's saying, no, I'm not going to eat this.
I don't know if Mike and Chase know how to do that. Just going to say, I love those two, but I don't think they can turn down food.
So think about how they were raised then. Think about the religious conviction in the home that they were brought up
early.
That must have been strongly religious, ingrained, very devout families that would have had to just imbue or impress this level of faithfulness into these kids.
But for them to take it on their own. I mean, I'm wondering, like, did their parents get killed? Did they watch their family? I mean, or just even were separated?
Yeah.
And now I have to make these decisions and these choices, and I don't have mom and dad there to support me, encourage me, or to hold me accountable. It'd be really easy to go, everybody else is doing it, I'm going to do it too.
Mm-hmm. And Daniel decides this is a line he's not going to cross. Like, he's been pushed and pushed and pushed and pushed and pushed, and like, that's it. I'm not going to defile. So he asks the chief official for permission not to defile himself. Verse 8, verse 9. Now God had caused the official to show favor and compassion to Daniel. But the official told Daniel, I'm afraid of my lord the king, who has assigned your food and drink. Why should he see you looking worse than the other young men of your age? The king would then have my head because of you. So Daniel's...
Which is a legitimate concern. Can't they just say, I'm in charge of all of you, you're supposed to look good?
And
if you're mistreated or look malnourished...
He's not exaggerating.
Yeah.
I mean, we saw what happened to the Pharaoh's baker in Genesis. I mean, it's this is the day and age. Some may say it even happens now. You just cross the wrong people and boom, you're gone. You're wearing concrete galoshes or your head's,
your alligator food.
So
crocodiles.
Yes. Yeah. I'm sure in that part of the world, crocodile food. So Daniel appeals, and we see glimpses too now of Daniel's wisdom too. He doesn't go pout in the corner. He's like, okay, I have this conviction. What am I going to do about it? Well, I'm going to go to the guy in charge, which apparently they had a good enough relationship. They could talk this out, because it wasn't like he couldn't even discuss this with his superior, that's great. Like, we see this is the kind of wisdom that's going to play out in the coming chapters. And verse 9 says, God caused the official to show favor and compassion to Daniel. But, he came back and said, basically, no, I can't. I'm not willing to die for you. So the answer is no, Daniel. But somehow, according to Daniel, the writer of Daniel, this is God's favor. God's favor was on Daniel, and the answer was no.
Oh.
How do you square those two things together? To go,
yeah.
That could be...
I feel like I could be wrong, but even just the way he said no to me is still a compassionate no. It's not like I'm just being a jerk. It's here's my legitimate reason. I'm afraid for my own life. If it was up to me, Daniel, I'd let you. But I'm afraid for my own life. I mean, to me, there's still conversation that can happen.
Sure.
From this.
The favor could have been that he didn't kill Daniel on the spot.
Exactly. Right. He didn't react.
Himself
yes.
to Daniel.
Yeah.
He didn't have to.
Right.
That's a good idea.
Do you have other thoughts?
thoughts that we would explain in the next episode.
So we'll leave everyone with that. Think about it for the week.
Yeah. Post your answer. What do you think?
There you go.
How do you juxtapose, or how do you bring these two things together? God's giving favor to Daniel, but then the answer that Daniel received was no.
It was not what he wanted.
And Daniel's asking to do something God honoring.
Right.
So
you would think, God, I'm trying to honor you. You would make it
easy.
So I can.
Yeah. Yeah. So let's see what happens.
Okay. So that's Bryan's way of saying jump on our social media, interact with us, sign up for our newsletter so you can email us and tell us what you think. But that's a really good, what does it look like when God has favor, but the answer is no? So, because that's probably something we've maybe have all dealt with. So thanks for joining us, and come back next week because Bryan has an answer to that question, right?
Yes.
Okay. We'll talk to you next time.